We've all fallen a time or two, right? So we know that there's gravity. But when you had chronic pain and you talk to a practitioner, when do they ever mention gravity? How much gravity did you guys learn in kinesiology? A little tiny bit, huh? A little tiny into it. Because we gloss over it. We just take it for granted. But the reality is that every structure on this planet has to abide by the laws of physics. And so when you take a look at this kid, right? This kid happens to be my kid when she was 7. But here's what happened. I took this guy Gluckman's seminars, and he introduced 3 planes of motion. Basically, it's a way to divide the body into 3 planes. All we're going to do this afternoon is talk about this. All we're going to do this afternoon and tomorrow is evaluate this. Because what kids show us is a 3-dimensional correctness around gravity. If you look at anywhere from all the way up to 8 years old, and I'll talk about this in a second, your ankle, lateral condyle, greater trochanter, shoulder, and ear. Every kid that you measure, every kid that we measured has a perfect vertical alignment to that force. This is what's called the coronal plane, or the frontal plane as it's more informally known as. The coronal plane is the side plane that cuts your body into front and back, but it talks about lateral movement. Now, what are we talking about here? We're talking about 2 types of muscle systems. It's very important to understand this because the first muscle system that we have called intrinsic muscles. So there are stabilizing muscles, right? So if we were to analogize them to this building, they're kind of the nails that hold the walls together, right? So they're the short, what we call core muscles. I don't like to use that word core because it's misused. But they're the structural muscles that actually hold our skeleton in place. So it's a static positioning. That's their responsibility. So the definition of intrinsic muscle are muscles that are designed to hold the skeleton around gravity. They do not change length with external force. So their job is to stabilize. Then we have the second group. The second group called dynamic muscles. So what do you think dynamic muscles are? Muscles that move you. So they cross joints. So they take this body and they're positioned in such a way and they're large enough to be able to actually contract to move your skeleton. So we have intrinsic muscles and we have dynamic muscles. Okay? So let's talk about misalignment. Why do we care? Why do we really care about whether somebody's aligned or not? Plato had a quote. And I always get this wrong. It's either Plato or Socrates. They had a quote, either one of them, we'll give them both the credit, that said that the beautiful form of the human body is that which works with the least amount of energy. The beauty of form is that which works with the least amount of energy. So what does that mean? Well, we have this force called gravity, right? We talked about engineers developing cars. We talked about architects developing buildings. Their job is to make the most efficient structure that works the best around that force.